All right, thank you very much, guys. I'm going to introduce David Bedrosian. He is going to be doing a beautiful ring demonstration for you. Just a little background on David. I have been following him on Instagram and trying to get him to work with us for about 3 years. So I really appreciate him finally being here. He does wonderful videos, he's wonderfully spoken, and he has wonderful knowledge. So please give him a round of applause.
Thanks, Celine.
Please enjoy the demonstration. Remember, we've got 10% off everything. Food truck will be here at 11, just right outside the back door. Enjoy the demonstrations, guys.
Thanks, Celine. I'm used to talking to my camera, so it's a little different talking to a bunch of humans out here. Typically, it's my camera right here in this pocket for Instagram, but it's nice to have human faces. So if you've got any questions or comments as I'm going, unlike when I'm talking to my phone, just interrupt me. I'll be glad to try and answer it or offer whatever I know. So as Celine said, we're going to be talking about turning rings, and I'll send this around. So there's some different turn rings on here, different sizes, so you can get sort of an idea. This one, obviously not turned, but ready to be turned. So let's start with that. And yeah, JD has a huge selection. I've just got this little bit of stuff here, but he's got a huge selection of things related to ring turning. So check him out for all kinds of stuff. And today we're going to be talking about turning a lifestyle ring. This is a single, a one-piece core, and we're going to be putting either an acrylic or a wood blank on top of that. And as far as the ring for sizing, you can get if you've got an existing ring, you can size it. You can size it off of this, a ring sizing bar, I think it's called, or you can get a sizing set to figure out what size ring core you need. And these ring cores come in different widths, so 3, 5, and 8 millimeters, and the ones I'm turning are stainless, but you can also get them out of silver. And as far as the material, as I said, you can use just about anything, but I've used both wood and acrylic, and I find when I first started turning them, I haven't turned a ton, but the few that I've turned, when I made them out of wood, I would put a CA finish on, and they looked great, but they weren't as durable, so I would find I'd have to either replace it or put a new finish on every couple of months, depending on how much abuse the ring took. So I decided to try acrylic, and I made this ring that I'm wearing. I did this, I think, back in July of 24, and it's still going strong. It's got a little chip somewhere in here, but I haven't had to redo this. So I find if the ring's going to be used on a daily basis, acrylic is going to be a lot more durable. If it's something that you're not going to use, not going to be a lot of hand washing, just occasional use, you've got more variety, I would say, in color and in grain if you use a wood blank. Okay, and there is a handout there that you can pick up afterwards. I've got all the steps that I'm going to go through today so that you don't have to write it all down if you want to do this at home. So we're going to start here. I'm going to use a 5 millimeter core here, and I'm going to use this piece of stabilized, I don't know what that is. I think it's stabilized maple, dyed obviously here. And I'm going to stick it to this face plate. So before I can do that, it's a pretty rough surface. It's come off the bandsaw. You can't see how rough it is, but I'm going to use double stick tape. So before I stick it down, I want to sand it somewhat smooth so that I've got a good surface for the double stick tape. And the cores, or the blanks, come fairly thick. So depending on the ring size, the ring width that you're using, you'll want to resaw this so that it's about 1 millimeter thicker than the ring core. And I've done that at home. If you don't, so I did this on a bandsaw. If you don't have a bandsaw, you can mount this directly on the lathe and turn it down before you do the rest of the work. If you leave it full thickness and you put the hole in and glue it in place, there's a lot of wood that's over the edge of the core, and it may break or chip. So that's why I find it's best to get it down approximately to the thickness. Some people will turn it down to match exactly the thickness of the core, but I find you don't need to do that, and it's just a bit of extra time. I'm going to turn off any extra thickness once I mount it on the lathe. So let's get started with that. We'll put some double stick tape on the back of this core here, and we'll stick it on the lathe. And before we start turning, we're going to put a hole in the center. And you could do this just using a chisel at the lathe, but I find I like to use a Forstner bit. So I'm going to do that. And if I can get this double stick, the corner of the double stick tape off here. Here we go. And I want this approximately centered. It doesn't have to be exact because you can see there's quite a bit of room, but I'll mark the approximate center here, and then I can use this to get it centered on this little sacrificial block. And you want to make sure that this block has been trued. You don't want it on an angle, or you're going to have trouble with the subsequent steps. So that's good enough there. And this is double stick tape, so it's pressure sensitive tape. So you want to apply a bit of pressure to make sure that this is sticking to the sacrificial block here. Okay, so that's good to go. So now, as I said, we could start turning and turn a hole with a chisel, but I find it's easier to use a Forstner bit. And I like using a carbide bit, especially if I'm into acrylic, but a regular Forstner bit will work as well. And I pick a bit that's about 1 to 2 millimeters smaller than the size of the ring core. So this is just over 22 millimeters. So this is a 20 millimeter bit. And you may think, oh, this is 22.1 or whatever it is. You may think that you could use a 22 millimeter bit, but I find the hole just isn't that clean, so you're better to leave a couple of millimeters, and then you can turn the rest of the wood away after that. And I'm just going to look at my notes to make sure I'm not skipping anything. Okay, so let's start drilling here. And you want to take your time with this. If the wood heats up too much, you could lose the bond to that double stick tape. And you don't need it running all that fast. But you do want to make sure you get all the way through. And there I'm through. So it doesn't take much. Kind of nice shavings coming off this dyed material here. And I'm just going to pick out the little bits in here. As I said, you want a clean hole there. Okay, so that's good, but as you can imagine, this isn't going to fit. 20 millimeter hole, 22 millimeter core, it's not going to fit. So I need to open up that hole to make this fit. And this is kind of a critical step. So I want the hole, I want the core to slide in. It shouldn't be so tight that I have to force it in, but I don't want any slop. So I'm going to glue this in, and if there's slop, yeah, I could fill it with epoxy, but when you're turning away the rest of the wood, you may end up turning through the wood and seeing some of the epoxy, and from the side of the ring, you may see the epoxy as well. So I'm looking for a fit where I can get this in without too much pressure, but I don't want any wobble. And also, I want this wall to be coming in parallel. I don't want it tapered, or I'm going to have a good fit on one side and a loose fit on the other. So I find it's best to use a carbide scraper, a fairly small one, and what I'll do, you'll see in a second, what I'll do initially is I'll take a cut in from the face, but as I get closer, I'm going to scrape using the side of the carbide scraper because I don't want to remove too much material, and I'm just going to sneak up on a perfect fit. So we'll get set up here. And I'm going to take my time with this. Usually I back off the tool rest so that I can fit the ring core in and check without having to move the tool rest each time. It may take me 6, 8 tries to get the perfect fit. And it's worth the time because if this hole becomes too large, then you've got 2 choices. You either scrap the blank or you pick a bigger ring core and glue that in instead. So, yeah. But I've got 2 blanks here in case I make a mistake on this one during a live demo. Oh, and I should say that there are other ways you can do this too. You can get a ring boring set, or a boring bar, I think it's called. JD's got them back there. And what that is, kind of like what's used on a metal lathe. It will come in and you can advance it 1/1000th of an inch at a time, and it'll keep things nice and parallel. And that's great if you're going to do a lot of rings, but if you're just making 1 or 2, it's a somewhat expensive thing to buy just for a couple of rings. If you want to spend even more money, you can get a shaper origin. Does anyone know what a shaper origin is? So it's a handheld CNC, and very, very accurate. You can dial things in to the 1/1000th of an inch. So, and I happen to have one at home, not for making rings, but for doing other things. So in that case, what I'll do is I won't even start on the lathe. I will use double stick tape to take this thing here, and then I'll program on the shaper origin to machine a hole just under the size that I want, and then I'll sneak up 1/1000th of an inch at a time until I get a perfect fit. But it's kind of cheating, and it's definitely not something you want to buy just to make rings. So we're going to do it the traditional way with a scraper here, and we'll see how we do as far as sizing it. Any questions so far? Has anyone turned rings? Okay, and similar process? All right, there was another hand up. Similar process? Yep, okay. And did you find that trying to get that hole the perfect size is a bit of a challenge? Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Just making sure I didn't miss any notes here. Yep, we're okay here. Okay, so I had turned the lathe speed down for the drilling. I can turn it up here, and I know that I've got to remove about just over 1 millimeter from this left wall, which is going to also remove from the other side. So I'm going to come in here, and as I said, I don't want to remove too much material, but I want to make sure I get all the way through, and I want to keep that wall parallel. So I'm going to hold the chisel parallel to the lathe bed, and I'm going to stop and I'm going to check regularly. And I can't even closely get that in. So I've got more to remove, but definitely I'm getting there. And so I'm starting now. I could come in from the face, but the risk there is that I remove too much. So I'm going to push the chisel all the way to the back, and I'm going to scrape using the side of the chisel. And I'm not removing much, but I'm just trying to get, as I said, that perfect fit. Not yet. So, and as I said, it's worth spending the time at this step, because otherwise you end up having to get another blank or another core. And I'm an engineer, and people joke with me that I spend too much time with precision in my shop, which I take that as a compliment. But if you're wondering, from the 1/1000th of an inch, how close am I to the ring core? I don't know, but I would guess you want to be within 5/1000ths of an inch of the diameter of the ring for a really good fit. And one nice thing about turning, especially rings, is you don't need a lot of material and it doesn't take a ton of time to turn a ring. So you can go start to finish in, well, we've got an hour and a bit for this presentation and we're going to go start to finish in that hour. And this is a wooden ring blank, as I said. So this one I would put a CA finish on. But the acrylic ones take even less time because you just need to polish them. You don't need a finish. So there we're getting there. And you saw, well, I think you saw how little material I'm removing as I was going there. So this goes in. It's a little bit tapered because I can get it in at the front, but I can't get it all the way in. So I seem to be dropping everything. Thank you. That's great. So I got this little dental tool that I use to just pull it out. You don't want to pry it too hard because you don't want to do anything to damage the core or the blank itself. So as I said, I'm a little bit tapered. So I'm just going to, even though I had the chisel, I tried to have the chisel parallel to the lathe bed, I still was taking off a little bit more at the face than I was at the back. So we'll fix that. And I'm making sure I get all the way through. Since I only have an extra millimeter to work with for the thickness, that ring, this has to go all the way in. Back it up a little bit there. So there it's in, and that's a pretty good fit. Use my tool here. So I don't have any, I can wobble it a little bit, but not very much. So this is a good fit. I didn't expect, I thought I was going to go too big in the demo. As I said, I've got a second one there. So this is ready. I can glue that in, or I'll be able to glue that in. But before I do that, I want to remove some of this excess material on the outside. And so I'm just going to get rid of some of I'm going to knock off the corners. I don't want to go too thin because I still have to pry this off the double stick tape. And if I make it too thin, that double stick tape is doing a pretty good job holding it on, and I could crack the wood. I'm not sure why I'm getting a little bit of noise there. Let me just make sure I've got that in tight enough, which I think I do. There's a wrench here too. Here we go. Yep, that's tight. So we'll just take it slow with the cut. So I'm going to turn it down until I've got about 1/4 of an inch of wall. Any thinner than that, and as I said, I worry about breaking or cracking that blank as I pry it off the double stick tape. Yeah, these shavings are kind of neat looking coming off this. Okay, so that's about 1/4 of an inch, and now I need to pry it off. So I've got this little pry bar here that I'll use, and I'm going to really be careful. I don't want to crack it. So yep, I got it in there, and that's come off as a single piece. So that the rings that are going around, there was one that was turned like this, and it has the ring core glued in place. So that's the step that I'm at now. I'm going to glue this in place. And the inside of the core is really smooth. So there's not much for the glue to bite. So I like to rough it up on the on some sandpaper here. And you can use CA glue, but I haven't tried CA for a ring. I like using epoxy. I've got a little more open time. I'm a little more familiar with using epoxy versus CA. I use epoxy when I'm doing my pens as well. So I'm just going to rough up this core. And I know that if you talk to JD, he said that that I think, Bill, you had chosen to get the smooth inside or the outside of the core, because if you're working with some clear acrylics or translucent acrylics, if there are ridges in here, you may see those. So in my case, I'm using wood, so I'm not too worried. And even if I was using acrylic, I think the amount of roughing up I'm doing is pretty minimal here. But it just, as I said, gives a little bit for the glue to bite into. So I'll rough it up. And this is, as I said, a 5mm wide ring core. If you use the 3mm, it's a little bit easier to get that hole because you don't have to be, you're only, say, 4mm wide. Trying to keep it parallel is not as hard. If you use the 8mm, it's a little bit more work to get that parallel for the full 8mm, or probably 9mm because you want that extra thickness. Okay, so I think I've got this scuffed up enough. This is similar to when you're making pens with the brass tubes and you scuff those up. Just a little bit of bite, as I said, for the glue. So I'm going to use epoxy. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. 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 Very nice. Yeah. Well, yeah, because it's just it's a scraper, right? And just pushing it in, and then you can pull it back 1/1000th of an inch at a time until you get that perfect fit. Yeah. And what would you estimate, like how tight is your tolerance, would you say, to the diameter of the ring core? Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah. Right. Yeah, the perfect fit. But if it's too tight, I think then you're just going to push all that epoxy away as you push the ring core into the blank. So there's got to be a little bit of space there, but not much. Two pieces? Yeah, that's right. So do you turn, I'm guessing with that boring tool, you turn a number of rings then? Yeah. Oh, excellent. Yeah. Because I don't know how, are there other applications for that boring tool? Okay. Yep. Right. Yeah. I'm looking for an excuse to buy one. That's what I was asking. Yeah, metal lathe, that's true, yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's try gluing this in. So I'm checking the fit again, make sure we're good. Make sure I can get this. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to mix up some 5-minute epoxy. I'm going to put some gloves on. I don't want to get epoxy all over my hands. And when I glue this in, I'm going to put the epoxy on the inside of the wood or the acrylic, and then I'm going to put the ring in that, and I'm going to rotate it just to make sure everything is covered. And when I do that, I'm going to end up with epoxy all over the ring, the metal part of the ring. So I'll wipe that off, but I'm not really concerned. I want the inside to be cleaned, but if the edge has epoxy on it, that's okay, because I'm going to turn, oh, thank you. I'm going to turn it flush. See, as I said, I do this on Instagram, so my camera's right here, and I can go back and retake it if I don't like the shot. Not so today. You know what, I'm not sure that I've got an equal amount there, but that's all right. Okay, so I'll mix it up, and if I was doing pens, I typically time the epoxy. I don't want to go too long, but for a ring, we're definitely going to get that in under the 5 minutes that this epoxy needs to set. Okay, so, yep, you can see that, good. So I'm going to spread this on, and I'm going to go heavy. A lot of it's going to get squeezed out, but some of it's going to stay in here, we know that. And I'm just making sure I've got on the entire inside surface. There's not a lot of material left after we turn away the excess. So you want a good bond. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Covered all of the inside. I'm going to stick the core in now. And I'm going to rotate it. And I need to make sure that the ring blank is about 1 millimeter thicker than the ring core. So I've got plenty of space, but I definitely need to make sure that the ring core, the metal part, is not sticking out on either side. If it is, it's not going to work very well. So that's in, and I'm going to wipe away the excess epoxy on the inside. But as I said, I'm not too worried about epoxy on the edge of the ring. And even if there's some epoxy on the inside, over time you can get it off. The inside of the ring, well, there, I just pulled it out. That's not what I wanted to do. Let's push that back in. Okay. Over time you can get that off. The inside of the ring's quite slippery, smooth, so you can scrape it off with something plastic. Okay, so one last check to make sure that there's a space that I can see a little bit of wood on each side of the ring core, and I can, so that's good. So I'll let that sit. 1056, I'll typically, well, at home, I'll let it sit for maybe an hour. Here we'll let it sit a little less than that. But I've prepared a couple of ones here that I've glued in at home, and we'll turn these. So these are both acrylic, and one of the reasons I did that is because when I finish turning it to shape, I can sand it and polish it. I don't have to put a CA finish on. So that's, as I said, an advantage of using acrylic. And the other thing, you can then, like with this ring that I'm wearing here, every now and then I'll take it back. I use a buffing wheel similar to this, and I'll just buff it up and it looks like new. Okay, so let's take off the faceplate, and we're going to put in one of these mandrels, and I'll show you that in a second. So let me take this off. So this is going to go in my Jacob's chuck. Is everything making sense so far? Not too complicated, right? Patience, I guess, is required because you don't want to rush, especially trying to get that hole size just right. You don't want to rush that. But now's the fun part. Now we actually get to do some turning where we can shape the ring. So this mandrel has steps on it, and I'm going to push the ring core against one of those steps, and then I'm going to use the Allen key, and I'm going to expand this mandrel so that it'll be a tight fit. And remember, what we just glued in, we've got excess material outside of the side of the metal. So we've got to turn away so that we become flush with the metal. But before we do that, I'm going to remove a bit of material on the face so that I'm not removing too much from the side. And you have to be, that's looking a little crooked, you have to be careful with the turning because you don't want, there's not a lot of material here, and you don't want to chip or to break the whole thing. And I'm going to use my carbide scraper again. You could use a skew, whatever you're comfortable with. And we'll see how we do. It's a little too high. Okay. So it looks like it's wobbling, but I think that's because when I glued in the ring core into the blank, that I probably didn't have that hole perfectly sized, so it could be in just a little bit crooked. That's going to be okay. When we turn it down, we'll get rid of any of that wobble. And is that visible on camera? Okay. I'm not going in the full width of the ring. So I'm just taking light passes. We spent, some amount of time so far getting to this point. So I don't want to destroy it by being too aggressive with the cut. And I'm not going to go down to the finished size just yet because I'm just trying to remove some material so that I can then go in and flush up the sides. So I can take off a little bit more. And it's kind of a personal choice as to how thick you want the ring to be. So that looks pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the edge of the scraper and I'm going to remove the excess blank until I get down to the core. And I'm going to know I've reached the core because I'll see some metal shavings. And this is a carbide scraper on this piece of stainless steel, so there's no problem with the carbide scraper. I can do that on this side because the mandrel is tapered. I can't do it on this side or I'll end up hitting the mandrel. So I'll do this side first, I'll take the blank off, turn it around, and do the opposite side. And just a light touch. And if I tried to go in from the face, I may take off too much and end up hitting the core. So I just come in on the side and just lightly scrape away. And I'm just looking for that first sign of metal shavings. But I also stop it. My stop button's on the opposite side. I keep hitting the wrong one there. But and I can see that I can feel there's a bit of a ridge there. So I've still got a bit more material to remove. So I'll work my way down. And there, I think I just saw a little bit of metal. Yep, so there's a little bit of metal coming off. So I'm flush on the side here, but I want to make sure I'm flush all the way around, which I should be, and I am. So I'm going to take that off. I'll turn it around, and I'll do the same on the opposite side. I'll take a look just to make sure. Yep. Well, you know what? I see a little bit of epoxy just in one spot here. I'm going to put it back on, and I can even feel just the slightest ridge. So I'm going to put it back on and take just a little bit more off. And that's okay. As I said, with a carbide scraper, there's no problem with cutting through just a little bit of the stainless steel. And I'm not applying much pressure at all on the side of the scraper. And I think that's all it took to get it flush. Okay, but the other side looks pretty rough. I've got epoxy I can see, and I've got material here sticking out from the side of the ring. So I'll put this in and make sure I'm tight to that. I want to be tight to this lip or this ridge on the mandrel. Otherwise, the ring's going to be on an angle. And let's tighten this up. And I'll do the same thing. So the right side was wobbling, the left side nice and true, which is what I expected. Okay, we're getting there. I just hit the mandrel with my chisel, which you kind of want to avoid that. But it wasn't a disaster, so that's good. And I'm trying to keep the chisel square to the, or perpendicular, I guess, to the lathe bed. But I'm going to do more shaping of this ring core, or the ring blank, after I get it flush. Because I've still got a lot of material here. This would not be very comfortable to wear. And I haven't seen any metal shavings yet, so I'll progress a little bit more. Okay, so there I've got a couple of metal shavings coming off. So I think I'm flush. I'm going to take it off just to make sure. And yeah, I can see that that I'm flush. And the surface here is maybe a touch rough from that scraper, but when I buff it, I'm going to buff, I can buff the metal as well so that it'll be a nice smooth surface there. Okay, so now we're ready to start shaping the ring. And I'll typically use a scraper on carbide. Sometimes I'll use a skew if it's wood. As I said at the beginning, I want to take light passes, light touch, because I don't want to crack the what's left. There's not a lot of material here. I don't want to crack here. And I'm not going to go down to the final size just yet. Especially when I'm working with wood, you may get a couple little chips that you're going to want to sand away. So if you go down to the final size and you start sanding, before you know it, you're going to have the ring core, and there'll be no material left. Or you're going to be left with just a sliver of material, which is not going to be very durable. So I'm not going to work on the whole width at once. I'm going to come across, and I'll come in and come across. Similar, I'd say, to when you're turning a pen with acrylic, although this, I would think, is probably a little bit more fragile than the pen. And it is sort of I don't know whether there's a specific size. How much larger should the outside of the ring be compared to the core? But I'm sort of judging what looks good to me. And I can remove a bit more material. Right now I'm just keeping it square, but I do want to round it over a bit as I get closer in size. Yeah, a little bit more. And I'm still, even with this being acrylic, I'm going to sand this, but I don't have to start, I don't think I'm going to have any chips, so I don't have to start with an aggressive sanding grit. So that's still square, and I'll turn a little bit more off, and then I'm going to round it over a bit, and I'm going to come in and just make sure I knock off the corners. I don't want, right now this is pretty sharp on the corners, so I want to make sure I knock those off once I get down to the size that I'm looking for. So if this was wood, I would probably stop at this size and move to sandpaper. But as I said, with acrylic, I don't think I've got any chips. So now I'm just rounding this, and I could round it with sandpaper as well. Definitely this acrylic turns quite nicely. Okay, so I'll look at that and see what I think. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to knock off the corners. I'll just come in and knock it off just a hair. Here I said I was an engineer obsessed with precision, and I use the term hair, but I think you know what I mean. Okay, so that's pretty good. So it's down to shape, you know, kind of flat looking. I want to bring this up so it's a nice high gloss. So I'm going to sand, and for that I can probably start with 320 or 240. And recently I've started using the Superior Grit, the original and the microfine, and I find this stuff saves a lot of time and works really well. So I'm just going to start with a bit of 240, and then I'll move over to the Superior Grit. And with this 240, I'm going to soften these edges a little bit more, just to make sure that it's nice and smooth. So I'll turn the speed down a little bit. And if this was wood, I would definitely, my experience is I would definitely have some sort of chips. When you're dealing with a wood ring blank, you're typically, this is typically, the grain is running this way. So the wood fibers are all this way. So it's pretty easy to pull out those wood fibers as you're turning. And when you're sanding, you're trying to get that as smooth as possible. With acrylic, you're not dealing with that. There are no fibers, but because of the wood fibers are running this way, it's pretty easy, as I said, to peel those off. So that's where the sanding is important, to leave enough space, leave enough material so that you can do the sanding to clean that up. I found that the hard way. One of the rings I turned, I got it down to the size that I wanted, and I started sanding, and I couldn't get rid of the little defects until I ended up sanding everything away. But that was okay. I just continued sanding until I had back to the core, got another piece of wood, made another ring, and I was good to go. It's all about learning and applying what you learn as you're going. Okay, so that looks good. So let's try this Superior Grit. We'll just use, I got a small paper towel here. And by the time this finishes, this will be dry, and we can try turning the wood, and we'll see how that looks. Okay, so I don't need much, not a lot of material here. And I run it pretty fast. I'll put it on, I'll stand out of the way so I don't get all over my face. But so even with this is not the super fine. I can see that it's getting pretty shiny. I'm getting a little too hot there maybe. So yeah, that's getting pretty shiny, and I'll switch over to the microfine. And even after that, I'm going to buff it. I use a 3-wheel buffing system, which I've got in the bag there, but we can try it on this buffing system here, and I think we'll have good luck getting a nice gloss. And I can't remember what the equivalent grit is of the of this paste, but as I said, it's pretty impressive. So that is looking nice and shiny. Let's take it off and we'll see what we think. I mentioned about buffing the metal, and I certainly wasn't doing that with the with this paste. I didn't want to get in too close to the mandrel. I didn't want the paper towel to get stuck on that mandrel. But definitely we've got a nice shine there. So we can take it off. And at this point, as I said, I would go over to the buffing wheel, and I'll just buff it here. Well, let me show you I use a 3-wheel system. I don't think I'm going to put it in the lathe here, but just this is what I use at home. And I've been buffing metal lately, so it's got a lot of metal, the dark from the metal. I've got some other wheels at home that I use only for buffing of pens or rings. So it's just I didn't have a chance to change those over. And when you're using a buffing system, I'm obsessed with a few things, I guess, in my shop, one of them being dust collection. So I've got a particle counter in my shop that monitors the air quality. And when you're using a buffing system, it's amazing how bad the air quality gets. So these things are kicking off a lot of dust. So you should wear a respirator if you're doing a lot of buffing. For this little bit, I'm okay. And normally I would put a buffing compound on, but in this case, there's already some on. And I would go up from, with the 3-wheel system, I would go from the most aggressive grit up to just a wax type paste that I put on the buffing wheel. And that's looking pretty good. So I'll pass this guy around and you guys can see what you think. And we'll put that wood one on. I think we've got, how are we doing for time? How are we doing for time? Can I turn the wood one as well? Okay. Okay. So I'm just going to inspect this. I usually look at these with a magnifying glass to make sure I didn't miss anything. And I would spend a bit more time buffing to make sure I get this metal surface nice and clean. But I'll pass this around. You guys can see what you think. Just make sure you don't put it on and can't get it off. Okay, so that was acrylic. That's quick, right? I don't have to put a finish on. You go from a little bit of sanding, the paste, buffing, and you're done. And as I said, the acrylic I find lasts a lot longer durability-wise than a wood blank. But if you want a bit more variety in color and in grain, or if you want to say it is a wooden ring, then wood is the way to go. Just perhaps don't wear it all the time, washing your hands all the time. The wood won't last nearly as long, or at least that's my experience. Okay, so we can put this on. Loosen this up a bit. And I've got quite a bit of material to remove here, quite a bit of wood to remove, but I definitely want to be careful because I don't want to break the core, or the blank, I should say, by removing wood too aggressively. And I can already see, maybe, let me just take this off again. I'll show you in the, I'll bring it closer to the camera. You can already see there's a little bit of, I was mentioning this one here. Okay, So you can see how the wood has chipped off here. The fibers are running this way, so those fibers peel off pretty easily, and some of those are already gone. So I'm expecting more of that as I turn it, but with sanding, I'll have better luck in maintaining those fibers so that I can get a nice clean surface. Any questions? No? Anything online, question-wise? Everything making sense? Yes? Yeah. Oh. Okay. So the question was, how do you turn these rings using a standard pen mandrel? And that's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. So, yeah, I don't know. There is a pen mandrel right here.
Yeah, so it just goes on a standard pen mandrel. Get real close here. So you just stick it on a standard pen mandrel. We actually have ring bushings that you use, and they're like a plastic Delrin bushing.
Yes, I've
so
seen those.
It goes the exact same way. You can use a live center mandrel saver, pull with your tailstock, and it works the same way. So you don't need that mandrel if you don't want to invest in something like that. You just got the pen accessories. You can do that perfectly well.
And so with that, with those Delrin, there's sort of a bushing that pushes in on each side. I think that, I'm not sure how you would turn the side of the ring, but I suspect because it is a Delrin, if you hit the side of if you hit that with the chisel, you'd be fine. So that's not something I've experimented with. Oh, it fits inside of the core. Okay, so it's a tight fit then. Yeah. Okay. Okay, good to know. I when I started turning rings, I didn't see that as an option, and so then I got one of these expanding mandrels, and with that, I haven't needed the Delrin.
If you're turning a lot of rings, this is a better way to go. It's better precision. You can put it on and off easily, but if you want to just start into it, you don't want to put a lot of money until you know you love it, which you will, then those are probably a good way to see and figure out how this works and then progress up to that.
And then you can progress even further when you go to JD's booth.
Oh yeah.
Because I thought I had all the materials needed for pen turning or for ring turning, and then I went to his booth and I thought, wow, I've barely started. Then I started to feel a little worried, like I'm no expert here and I'm the one doing the demo. I still don't contend to be an expert on this. I've just turned a few and they've worked out and my wife likes it, so that's the most important thing. Okay, so we're going to turn this down. Yeah, it turns pretty well. I'm not getting any chipping here, so that's good. But, you know, you always say that and then boom, something happens. So I'm not, similar to the acrylic, I'm not going all the way across. I'm not trying to take off the full width of the ring. I guess if it was a 3mm core, I probably would, but for the 5 and the 8, I'm not. And I'm not going to go down, as I said, I'm not going down to the finished size that I want. I want to leave some material to be removed with sanding, but I've still got more to go here. And this one is going to take a little more work because it's wood and I'm not going to be able to just buff it and get a high gloss finish. I need to apply some sort of finish to it, and my experience has been that CA is going to be the most durable, but even then, as I said, with hand washing and with other abuse, it can chip. And but when that happens, if just the finish gets chipped, what I've done is I'll bring it back, I'll sand it lightly to remove that finish. I'll put a new coat of finish on. I typically use about 10 coats of thin CA, 10 or more even, and then lightly sand it with high grit paper and then go to the buffing system. So you can bring it back to life with a wood ring, provided it's not cracked. I've had some rings where the wood is actually cracked, and at that point, well, then I put it on the mandrel and I just turn away the wood and I make another ring. I don't have to buy another core. Sorry, Bill. If I don't have to buy another core if I can just turn it away. Yes. Okay. Okay, so the question or the comment was that this gentleman's had good luck with stabilized wood, which this is, just with buffing or just with sanding up to high grit. So we're going to give it a try because this is stabilized wood, and we'll see what it looks like. Yeah. Oh no, I believe you. I guess so for me it's wood. I just naturally go to put the acrylic finish on. So or the CA finish. So I'll sand this, and yeah, it is brittle, yes. Okay, so yeah, the comment was that CA glue is brittle, which is true. It's really durable, but it can be brittle. So it's, yeah, hand in hand. So let me sand this. We'll go up through the grits and we'll see what we get. We'll see how shiny it looks. So I did have here we are, piece of sandpaper here. So this is oversized. So, and I want to round it a little bit first so I don't have to do all that with sanding. And you could leave it if you want. You could leave it as a square ring. Nothing wrong with that. A square face. And I'm just going to knock off that corner a bit here too. I'll do the same with sanding. My taper's not, or the diameter's not quite good there, or even, I should say. Okay, so let's sand this. And we'll see how we do. Well, timely comment because I wasn't planning on putting a CA finish on anyhow with 10 coats, 10 or more coats, so this is good. And I guess I've not had any problems with overheating the ring with sanding, but you probably want to be careful because if you do overheat it, you may get a glue failure. So that was 240. We'll get some 320. Well, we could go right to the paste, but I want to shape this just a little bit more, which I can do with the sandpaper. I don't think I'd be able to shape it with the paste. So I'm just rounding this a little bit as I go, making sure that those edges, the corners are not sharp. This is an interesting color for sure. Okay, so that's up to, I think I'm at 600 grit, and I'll switch over to the paste. So it's pretty flat as far as the gloss, but that's okay. Let's see what we can do with the paste here. And I'll use some fresh paper towel so I don't want to contaminate one with the other. Okay. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. And this is the original, so I can get a higher gloss, I think, with the super or the microfine. Let's try that. So this is good. I learned something new about using of the stabilized woods. Oh, okay, yeah. And I've used that, but I find with the buffing wheel that I showed you, I save a lot of time. I think I get the same gloss. I get a gloss that's sufficiently high, because I was using the micro mesh, and I mean, you get a great result, but it's slow. So this is looking just like acrylic. Not sounding great. Didn't have that in quite tight enough here. Okay, well, we'll see how that looks here. I'm just going to use a fresh piece of paper towel and just make sure everything's off there. So in looking at this, I think if I put a finish on, I think it would be a higher gloss, but I would have to experiment with the buffing wheel to see whether or not I can get that same gloss out of this, but it still looks great. So I can pass that around as well. But you can compare, well, you won't be able to because you won't have the other ring, but this one I would definitely say isn't quite as high gloss as the other one. Here, I'll come in on this side. But that's the idea. Yes? Any? No, I've not. Oh, have you done any, made any rings with deer antler? Thank you. So no, I've not done that, but that would be interesting. Can you get pieces large enough that you would be able to drill a hole? Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Yes? So the comment was this gentleman uses the hot polishing wax to bring out the shine. And I'm not familiar with that. Oh, the hot, yes. Okay, yes, I am familiar with that. I've not used that. I've used different micro abrasives, and most recently the Superior Grit, being Canadian, especially, I especially like that. But yeah, whatever works, definitely, I would go for that. Yes. Possibly. Yeah, possibly. Yeah. I think if I buffed it with the 3-wheel system that I've got, I'd get a little more shine. I don't know that I would get the same as a CA finish. I haven't tried. I'd have to experiment a bit more at home. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. As I said, there are handouts there if you want, with going through the different steps that I talked about today. And yeah, that's great. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, David, for being here. Like he said, he has got a wonderful handout here. It goes through step by step of everything he did today. Make sure you pick his brain, ask all the questions. I'm going to have him come over to the side. We've also got a couple shopping lists here if you guys want to grab one of those on your way. We'll be back here at 1:30. But before we go, I just wanted to thank David so much for coming in with a nice gift here. We appreciate your expertise. Good, I'm glad. All right.